Lapse the steering wheel here. Give me the steering wheel. Hey, steering wheel. Somebody tell him to give it to him. Come on. Whoa.
Your leg, my please. Your leg.
How the f*** is this possible?
I'm driving like a grandma. Get that, Ralph? Did you hear me? From our radio. Ferrari to the race. Ralph, acknowledge. Now, come on, close him down and kill him. We've got a lunatic on the track down the hanging stage.
I am so annoyed.
Hello and welcome back inside the Park for May for podcast number 904. This is Todd.
No, Todd, not now.
AKA Negative Camera. You know what we do on race weekends, and you know why we do it.
We watch one, then we talk about it. Then we watch one, then we talk about it. Come on, Todd.
That's exactly what we do. And tonight we're going to review the Azerbaijan Grand Prix. How exciting is that? I'm awful excited, but I'm even more excited to introduce my co-host tonight.
Wrecked from out of the wasteland. He's bad. He's beautiful. He's crazy. It's
Hello, everybody. This is Paul Charles, the International.
Paul.
Yes.
It's exciting. And you know why I'm excited? I'm darned excited. Well,
Because of next week?
Yes.
Yes.
This weekend, right?
Yeah. Yep.
I'm awful excited about this week.
I know.
Can't wait for this weekend.
Yes.
So all of our listeners that go to the IMSA races, they've all got to hang out with you and chat.
Yep.
This weekend, Paul made it possible for me to tiptoe over to Indianapolis and sneak into the Heart of Racing area and get an autograph from him. So I am so excited. I'm going to take my kit, see if he'll sign my shirt.
Get in line, though. Take your turn. Don't
I know.
I don't play favorites.
I know you don't. I'm going to have to get in line. It's like Oliver. May I have some more, please?
Yeah.
My hat. I'm going to be out there, trying to get a signature from Paul. And
Yeah.
I'm awful excited about that.
Yeah, it's exciting stuff, right? You haven't seen an IMSA race since
It's
Petite,
been a while.
maybe, for a
Since
few years.
Petite. Yeah, Petite would be the last IMSA race I saw. But this is different this year at Indy, right? It's a 6-hour race.
It is, yes, a longer race, part of the Endurance Challenge as well. So it's an added race for that. But yeah, we last year it was a sprint race, which is the first time we raced there, and then they added it to a long distance race. Maybe Roger Penske wants to sell more fuel. I don't know what it is. But either way,
Roger and I are like this.
Yeah,
man.
He's always stopping me in the paddock.
Oh, yeah, I'm
Always.
sure. He's
like,
always probably asking you how I'm doing and how I've been. And
Yeah.
yeah.
Have you seen Todd? He just doesn't call anymore.
Yeah, he just doesn't call.
So, well,
anymore.
he's busy, family, all that, Roger, Yeah.
Come on, Roger. What do you think? I got time to call you every week? I'm fine.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. So here, I'm going to prove it, Paul.
Yeah.
I'm going to prove it in real time.
Okay.
If I can find it, I'm going to prove just how close Roger and I are. If I can find it in real time, I probably won't. But anyway, it was, well, here it is. For those watching on YouTube, here I am with Roger Penske. There
you are.
Me and Roger, we're like this.
Yeah.
I got to say, I don't know how he is to
Right
do with
before the security pulled you off him.
Right. So I'm hoping he'll call me tomorrow and wish me happy birthday.
Yeah, I'm sure he will. Happy birthday, by the way.
It's tomorrow.
Perfect.
Well, my
right?
Christian Horner, it worked perfectly.
Yeah, that is perfectly. It finally all came to
Yeah.
a
See?
peak. Yeah,
It all worked out. I learned that from Christian Horner all those years ago, for just this exact moment. So
don't take those kind birthday wishes.
No. If they're not on the day,
Make sure they're correct. Yeah.
Exactly. He's sending me WhatsApp maps or WhatsApp messages for some reason. I don't know.
Christian. Yeah.
Yeah, it's yeah, no, that was a low blow. It's just comedy, is it?
Yeah, just a little fun.
Yeah, just having a little fun. If you can't laugh,
Yeah.
So I'm awful excited about going to IMSA, and I'm equally as excited, Paul, to talk about the race in Baku.
Yes.
Tonight.
Speaking of the subject of the day.
Potentially a 4-way fight for the win there.
It sure
It
was.
was close.
Yeah, well, it was a 4-way fight till two of them disappeared. But yeah,
Yeah.
it was a thrilling Baku for sure.
It was.
I mean, it's just kind of adding on to the whole season of how competitive all these cars, and even the Mercedes wasn't even in the mix. But this season is pretty crazy on how tight the field is for sure.
It's so funny because in our fantasy GP, this has just been my year in fantasy. No matter what I do, I had it on my GP for the win. I had Lando, Charles Leclerc, George Russell.
Wow.
Now I missed Lando.
2 of the 3, yeah.
2 of the 3. I had fast lap. I had points scored. I had the right number of safety car, virtual safety car.
Okay.
All that didn't move one spot in the fantasy.
It's all strategy, man. I can't tell you.
I even have Williams as one of my teams. They're both in the points. And I have McLaren as one of my teams. They're both in the points. I have both. I'm done.
All I can tell you, if Perez hadn't have crashed, I would have made up a lot of ground this weekend.
Yeah.
I moved up one spot. I'm in P5 or P6 or something.
Yeah, I know you did.
But I had Perez as one of my drivers, and man, I was just a lap and a half short of really rubbing it in everyone's faces.
It's like you and Grace. I mean, you guys could pick both Bottas and Guan Yu and Yuki for the podium.
Yeah.
And you'd still gain tons of points, and I don't know how you do that.
So, like, well, you know.
I think you're slipping on a $5. I don't know what's going on. You guys got to be.
I got some very good engineers at the Heart of Racing that can hack into computers and change points.
You're in there like Ferris Bueller changing your grade.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so it's unsettling. I got to tell you.
I'm sorry, but rules are the rules.
Rules are the rules. So let's talk about Baku, shall we?
Yep.
It's a toddling town, city of fire.
Yikes.
Okay. Born from the crucible of strife.
Yes, lovely.
So I'm sure there's a perfectly legitimate explanation for that title, and I'm just not aware of it as an American.
Yeah.
Purposely obtuse. So it's a challenging track, though, Paul. It's first on the calendar in 2016. Remember, all you veterans out there, when it came on, it burst onto the scene, labeled as what? The European Grand Prix. Remember those days?
Yeah.
Remember? You had the Jersey Barrier Grand Prix in Valencia that was called the European Grand Prix.
Yeah, it used to bounce around, didn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, it did. And it would move around to wherever, it was in Germany, right? When Schumacher was hot. Then it was over in Spain when Fernando was hot. Yeah. And then it went to Azerbaijan. It was like, there's no driver over there. Why is that the European Grand Prix? And is that, while technically Europe, it's not, it doesn't jump to mind.
Yeah. They used to have it way back when Brands Hatch used to be an F1. We used to have Brands Hatch and Silverstone on the same year as F1 races.
Right. So that jumped around. Well, that lasted all of 12 months, and then they rebranded it the Azerbaijan Grand Prix in Baku.
Easy for you to say.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. AZ. A very long straight, and they increased the DRS zone this year. And so there's some very tight and twisty parts, the old section with the castle and how narrow that track is there, very difficult. I thought it was interesting. They had one Jacques Villeneuve on the Sky Sports.
Oh, did they?
This weekend.
I wasn't on
and
Sky
everybody
this week.
Was cringing, but I actually thought he had some pretty insightful stuff this weekend.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. He was talking just more from a driver. He can be a little cagey, but, it's no different than having Nico Rosberg on there, right?
Hopefully it's different.
Well, Jacques was. And I do think there's times that Nico is very insightful from a driving perspective. Yeah. So, maybe the Sky crew kind of kept Jacques on the driving thing and less politics, and that went well. But when they were at that tight bit at the castle, he was talking about, yes, the elevation change is pretty significant there going up that hill. But he said the real difficult thing is the sight line for the drivers, because the bollards all on the Tech Pro are all the same color. Yeah. And you can't, it's difficult to measure distance
Can't
away.
distinguish, yeah.
Yeah, because it's a blind corner. So all you're seeing is that bollard, that hoarding advertising going into the corner, which automatically blends with the counterpoint going across the end of the curve up the hill, and it's difficult, to get yourself.
Yeah, and that's kind of part of what we always talk about street circuits is getting your eye in, and that's why Monaco, it's very important to get laps, because on street circuits especially, things get a little grayed out a little bit, so you've got to get drive-by-sight pictures. So if the bollards are the same, then you have to use some information from further out to make sure your alignment and your trajectory and speed are correct for where you are. And that's why you can't just jump in and go, oh, I'm going to take this flat. You've got to build up that brain history of going around the track to kind of build those pictures up at obviously when you're driving a race car as fast as you can, that it's got to be very accurate. You can't just say, oh, well, I'll turn around here. It's going to be very accurate. So that's why driving by sight picture is important. Braking zones are fairly easy on street circuits because usually there's, you got the signboards and usually pretty straight braking zones, etc. But yeah, on those tight where everything's going back and forth and there's not one line, that's super, super important.
Yeah.
Another thing is, driving street circuits probably wouldn't really appeal that much to a Jacques Villeneuve type who was willing to always go above and beyond. I'll take Eau Rouge flat till we run out of spare cars, right? And I was thinking, why is Sergio better here than other places? And it's because there's certain drivers that need the ability to hang it out just that little bit more and are willing to take those risks, like the Maxes and etc. on road courses. But when you're on a street course, that gets taken away from you. So you have to you have to drive within maybe what your capabilities are to keep the car in one piece. And maybe that's where Sergio's abilities really pay off. He doesn't have that little extra that the Maxes have, but what he does have is the ability to be repetitive and drive within those limits a little bit, which probably keeps him back from scoring all pole positions. But I think that kind of benefits him at this circuit.
It's a really good point because he does tend, he's the only repeat winner here.
Right.
And he does tend to do well here. And I remember his debut in Monaco. He was just absolutely stunning. And seems to thrive in that. That's a good point. On a map, I look at this track and it doesn't get my heart racing. It's just kind of square, and then there's some twisty bit, and it doesn't really look that great.
Yeah.
But I'm sure the driver's heartbeat is racing. I think it is a lot more difficult in real life and in racing, and even when you watch the race, it's impressive. But you'd be forgiven for not thinking it would be that great of a race looking at a map,
Right. And it's a little different from Singapore where, what I don't like about Singapore is the change of pace and stop-start nature of it, where it's hard to build out a rhythm. This one isn't so bad because you got the long straight, but that's basically a straight.
Yeah.
And you got a couple of the downhill left is obviously the most hard corner not because of the actual corner itself, but the approach to it and under braking and the car's loaded up and one slight lock up and you're going to lose some of the front tire grip and you go into the wall. So it's not as difficult as said as Singapore. So I think drivers can attack it pretty good, but obviously still that first section kind of flows from one to the other. So they're always in that mindset of I'm between the walls, I've got to be accurate, etc. Till they get out down by the water, and then they can let loose. So it keeps your focus in the same frame of driving that the car demands.
Yeah,
that makes sense.
And I thought it does. And I thought, interestingly, this Paul, much like, do you remember the Frick system or the asymmetrical braking, which they put a stop to this year, like the dual diffuser or Mercedes? Remember when they had the DOS,
Yes.
That whole thing? Well, this year's buzzword coming out of this weekend and all everyone's talking about is a term called mini DRS. As if DRS wasn't controversial enough, now we have the mini DRS. And isn't that exemplified by McLaren? And some people wondering, Paul, if that flexion of the front flap on that is moving up. If that didn't play a role in keeping Oscar ahead of Charles for the rest of the race. So lots of discussion going on. And, this whole aeroelasticity issue has been for years and always will be a major issue for Formula One. It just plagues Formula One, and enterprising engineers, figuring out how much composite is needed or how much material is needed to pass the FIA test, but then experience that flexion at a higher load, right?
Right. I mean, how they lay the carbon. That's like a black art for sure. How they lay the carbon in the wing really changes how the wing bends and flexes for sure. How
it performs, exactly. And so they're chasing that. So, keep your eye on that heading into Singapore. It may still be a talking point, but, I'm sure teams, and this is the way Formula One normally is, you have the teams that are doing something similar to that, and then you have the ones that aren't. So it's the haves and the have-nots. And the have-nots generally, start to lodge a complaint that question the legality of that, right?
Right.
And whether that's legal or not. So I don't know if it's oh boy, that's really clever, why don't we do that sort of thing? Or if hey, that's against the regulations and we
can't afford to do that ourselves.
And we can't afford to do that, so we need to get it banned, right?
Yeah.
So we'll see heading into Singapore. Well, let's talk about the race. It was an exciting race.
Yeah.
It was won by Oscar Piastri in P1, McLaren, and Lando Norris's teammate in P4, with all the talk about, are they going to favor Lando this weekend? All of that was put to bed on Saturday, leaving Oscar to really make a bold pass on Charles Leclerc after his pit stop. He then set about harvesting and deploying, which I think he was doing with aplomb, the amount of harvesting and where to deploy and how. I thought he was doing perfectly to keep the Ferrari behind him. And I was wondering, much like that beginning, that opening stint, I was wondering if he wouldn't cook his tires like he did on the first stint, as the Ferraris are typically good on their tires, and this would leave Oscar a little vulnerable. But that didn't happen. In fact, it was quite the opposite. And being the ridiculous Ferrari fan I am, I was thinking, okay, you got around Charles, okay, but Ferraris typically have tire sympathy. They're good on their tires. Oscar, McLaren, while they're good, I wouldn't have put him in the same category as Ferrari. And so I was thinking just, a number of laps towards the end of the race, Charles will start to push, Oscar's tires will be cooked, and Charles will get around. But that's not what happened at all, Paul. It ends up, Oscar spent 2/3 of the race defending from Leclerc in what he called the hardest race of his life, and that warranted driver of the race accolades from fans. And he ignored his engineer's advice to take it easy when he made that pit stop on fresh rubber, and he lunged down the inside of Leclerc to make that pass for the win. It was great. Yeah, it was a fantastic result for Oscar.
Yeah, no, it really was. I mean, the guy's, I think I texted you, he's a robot. I mean, you don't see a lot of emotion from him. He's very driven. Don't mistake him not being jubilant and jumping around and, high-fiving everybody. He's not seriously determined to be a world champion.
Yeah, for sure.
But he's just going about it a different way than some of the others do. I mean, for him to be able to hold Leclerc off for that long, he had to be inch perfect every lap, as you say, really managing deployment to be able to use it when he needed it, which was obviously in the DRS zone down that front straight.
Yep.
You would think he was just going to get repassed straight away, but he ran it perfectly. And remember the middle sector where Norris was told to hold up
Perez.
I mean, that's the place where he starts harvesting the energies, where Leclerc can't get by him, and then deploys it down the straight. And obviously, perhaps the McLaren inherently is a bit faster on the straight anyway. I mean, I don't know how he could have ran it any better. And making that move. Sometimes drivers have to do that, right? I mean, they know, as much as we say, well, the drivers can't call the strategy, they don't have all the information. Well, the crews or the engineers don't always have all the information of what the driver can feel in his fingers and on his butt, and what he thinks the car can actually physically do, even going against the data that they apply to it. And that's exactly what he did. I remember one race I was just about to pass a guy to win, and then the guy came on the radio and said, "No, not yet, wait." And I'm like, that split second of hesitancy, I didn't make the move at that point, and I knew I had it, right? It was like 2 laps from the end, and then a bunch of lap traffic got in the way. I didn't win the race. I could have won the race if I just stuck with my guns, and that's exactly what Oscar did. He stuck to his guns. He's learning and learning and learning. This is only, what, 1.5 years in Formula One?
Yeah, second season, yeah.
And, man, I mean, he's going to be formidable. I mean,
I think
they always brandish future world champion, blah, blah. But, I mean, I think he's going to be a force.
No, he's a cut above. You can tell it.
Yeah.
And the guy that told you to wait, he never worked in motorsport again, did he?
Yeah. They never found the body.
They never found him, did they? He's in the concrete pouring of some bridge in London or Miami or wherever that happened.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah. So, no, he is a cut above. Did you happen to catch, and I really thought, if you guys haven't seen the interview, I don't know if it was F1's website that did. I'm sorry, guys, whoever the host of the interview, I should know this. I think it was F1. But anyway, they interviewed Adrian Newey at Aston Martin, the day of the announcement, and they spent, I don't know, half an hour, 45 minutes with him, and it was interesting interview. But there was a part in there, and he's taken some flack about it. I don't exactly know why. He's worked with Max for Max's entire career, so nobody would know Max better than Adrian or Christian, etc. But Adrian is saying that Max is misunderstood. They think, there's some stuff that he's dumb or whatever. He's like, he is anything but dumb. But he made this comment that I thought was interesting about Formula One drivers. What he was saying about Max is that there are drivers on the grid that have so much mental capacity beyond what they're currently engaged in. And what he was saying is, when you're in the fight, in a race, going at it, hammer and tongs, some drivers, that's all they can mentally handle. They're hanging on,
right?
For their very lives, and they can't process anything beyond that hammer and tongs fight for their lives. But there are other drivers that their mental depth and capacity goes way beyond what they're currently doing in the car.
Right.
And he said that Max is one of those guys. I think Schumacher was one of those guys.
Senna was definitely one of those guys.
Senna was definitely one of those guys.
Yeah.
Schumacher would get out and say he was reading the large signs and reading lap times when they didn't have them on the steering wheels and stuff. But I do think Oscar is one of those guys. I think he's got that capacity beyond what he's engaged in. Yeah. And I think, I think that's for real.
I mean, it's when the limit of the car is below the limit of the driver. That's when the champions are made, right?
Yep.
I mean, literally, just because you're at the edge of the car does not mean you should actually not have any capacity for anything else, and that really does. It plays off really well, and that's why the good endurance races stay the good endurance races, because they got lots of capacity to see the forest for the trees, and they can see the ice, as we talk about Gretzky. But it's definitely a big deal to be in sync with the car enough where you do have extra capacity to make different decisions, which Hamilton has. All the top,
all the top guys do. Yeah. And Adrian made the comment: you can just look them down the grid and see who does and doesn't have it. Yeah, and who's world champion potential and who's not. Right. Now, the silly thing is the follow-up question should have been, okay, tell us who does and who doesn't. They didn't ask him that, right?
Yeah. But that's where consistency is built.
Yeah.
I mean, even in like sports car racing, you got gentleman drivers. Sometimes they can throw down a lap. Yes. They may not have known how they did it, but it's the consistency comes from being within your limits. With still using the car at its utmost. So
I would think, like in your team, that's why you think of like drivers like Ross or Alex. It's that consistency, that capacity to see beyond. Because in endurance racing, if Ross is driving a stint in that Aston Martin, when he gets out, that's somebody else's car. You can't show up with it totally destroyed and the brake pedal touching the floor, right? So he's got to think beyond what stint he's in. He's got to think of your strategy that you want him to do, his strategy, how the car feels. There's so much going on in the mind of those drivers sitting in your Aston Martin, plus your mind, your strategy, your chief engineers in your team trying to radio, what to do and pit stop strategies. And there's so much going on. And those great drivers can take all of that and a 360 ability to read the entirety of that race, to understand where they are in that race, even though they don't visually see the whole race like we do on timing and scoring and maps and stuff. Yeah. And it's impressive.
Yeah, and those kind of drivers usually don't get involved in incidents as much either, because they do have that capacity while still at limit to see where everyone is and kind of judge, what's going to happen next, so to speak. Remember talking to Alec McNish all those years ago? Very much of the same ilk.
Very much. And I think in Oscar's case, Paul, he's still young. He's been, 18 months, right? So
it's crazy.
He's still young, and he's winning races, and he's applying his skills. It didn't take him very long. A lot of drivers that come into Formula One really struggle with tire management. The tires are unlike anything else they've driven, and brakes and et cetera. But, he kind of cut his teeth last year. This year he's been on it. He's going to make mistakes still, right? But the reality of it is, if he's this good now, I mean, when you juxtapose him in his second season versus Max in his second season, I know he's a little older than Max was at the time, and other great drivers, that came in, he is right there with all of them, there with all of the greats, So
I mean, and you don't. Till you gain the experiences, it's not in your toolbox.
Yeah, you don't.
And so
have
that's what time takes.
Yes,
there's you could read what's going on with the suspension and everything, but those little things like that move that he made, that's something he's learned as he's gone along in his last few races, and learned what he's capable of and what the tires are capable of and what he can get away with. He was worried about taking the sheen off the tires and being vulnerable, but he's gauged such a good understanding of it now that was a premeditated, thoughtful decision, not just oh my God, there's a gap, I'm going for it. He was thinking long and hard before he made that move, and knew that he could get away with it. Yeah,
it's a great point about a toolbox. If you never had the tool, then you didn't know when to use it or anything like that. But once you learn that, you've got the tool in your toolbox, and you're like, so that's how you get an oil filter out. I was in there with channel grips and tearing it up. And so when you figure that out and how to apply it later and where, it worked. And I think that's very true. And it takes all of these guys time. And it's also got to be a challenge. This is why I think it's always a challenge for guys like Toto Wolff, who's looking at Kimi Antonelli. Does he have enough tools? Has he got enough tools from Junior Series in there that he can manage in F1?
And the truth is probably not. But, when that's why, as you're saying, Oscar's a little older than when Max started in F1. Yeah. But he was racing all that time. Yes. Max got kind of thrown into it. His natural skill, his ability, they couldn't resist it. They had to keep pushing him up. He won his first race driving a Red Bull. But we kind of saw his growing pains a little bit at the beginning, right? And Oscar's kind of jumped in a little further up the ladder of experience. And so he's not going to make some of the mistakes that Max made at the beginning.
I agree. Yeah. Let's talk about Lando. Lando. I love how Zach says Lando.
Do you?
Lando.
I don't even know anyone in the world that pronounces it like that.
I don't either. It's a Zachism. Lando had a lot of work to do, but he started on hards, made his way into the points, and then even held up Sergio Perez to allow Oscar to avoid the undercut, which I think is, a great team move on his part. Lando then made the pass late on Max to take a points gain against Max, his closest rival in the Drivers' Championship, as well as to combine with Oscar's win. And this means that McLaren leave Baku with just 59 points between Lando and Max in the Drivers' Championship, but most importantly, they are now 20 points ahead in the Constructors' Championship. They've taken the lead over that, leaving Red Bull and Helmut Marko to suggest, there's no way we're going to win the Constructors at this point. It's like, okay.
Goodbye, good luck, and good riddance.
Okay, Helmut. There you go.
It's over.
It's over. Game over. So anyway,
maybe they should have changed their driver lineup a lot sooner.
Maybe. So a huge weekend for McLaren, and I don't want to overplay this, but I don't want to understate it either. So every position in the Drivers' Championship is worth tens of millions of dollars, and with that comes a little success ballast, right? You get less wind tunnel time, et cetera, et cetera. But McLaren, as a customer team, folks, of Mercedes has risen in the last 18, 24 months to take the lead in the Constructors' Championship, and it's a Herculean effort by all the men and women working. I couldn't be happier for them, so it's awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, as Lando says, or even Oscar maybe said it, at the beginning of last season, they are literally the last car on the grid.
Yeah, right.
A miraculous turnaround, and there's little adjustments here and there. It wasn't clean sailing all the way to the top, but now they've kind of got that magic button in the car. And
Paul, they did it without an Adrian Newey.
They did do it without an Adrian Newey. But they were helped by Red Bull quite a lot, I believe. The turmoil at Red Bull, the driver choices at Red Bull, I think, you got to give 50-50 to McLaren overachieving and Red Bull underachieving from what they should have been doing the whole year, right? Shouldn't be this close, quite honestly. If
Max was nice, he'd send a portion of the Constructors' Championship prize money to Christian. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thanks for stubbing your toe there, Chief.
But so Lando did a great job coming from the back. Still McLaren a little suspect on a strategy call in the race, fine, but in the qualifying, not good to assume there was the times were just tumbling at that point, and they got caught out. So once again, another lesson learned within the team. They're still, relearning how to be a winning team, I think, and that was another thing. You can't be complacent even in Q1.
Yeah, agreed.
Lando holding up Sergio, that was essential, I think, for
crucial
Piastri to win the race.
Yeah, for sure.
The Red Bulls were literally the fastest car on the track, I believe, but they managed to fight their way to the back. Yeah,
it was great. Let's see. Let's talk about Ferrari. Charles Leclerc, P2, Carlos Sainz, a DNF. Leclerc led from pole, and the question was, have Ferrari's upgrades been good across all tracks, or were they kind of Monza specific, which you would understand as their home Grand Prix? I think, Paul, it would seem to be that they are a net positive across the remaining or the balance of the season.
Yeah.
But Oscar managed to take the lead from Charles, and Charles admitted that he didn't defend hard enough. He should have defended harder than that. And this left the Monegasque hounding Oscar for 2/3 of the race all the way to the end. I was thinking that his tires and Ferrari's tire sympathy may pay dividends late in the race, as I mentioned earlier. And there was a moment when they seemed to, but he just couldn't get around him. And at that point, I think Charles cooked his rears and couldn't get around Oscar, and was at this point really at risk of being passed by Sergio Perez and his own teammate, Carlos Sainz, until their collision.
Yeah.
And so he hung in there. He had that unforced error, where he put it in the barrier early in the weekend. The team got the car put back together, did a fantastic job. You feel like maybe he left the door open too much on the pass from Oscar. I don't know. I thought he could get back around him, but it just wasn't in the cards. It's not to say that I think Charles had a bad weekend. I think he did a great job, but he wasn't happy. It's not what they wanted. They were really looking for the win.
No, I mean, it's tough to say. I mean, we would have thought he would have also got back by again. Right. Yeah. I mean, it wasn't a bad decision in that case. It was like, hey, man, if you want to go for it, go for it.
Yeah.
But, I'll get you in a couple of laps. But ultimately, the brilliance of Piastri thwarted that. They go out on the tires, and it is important to build the temperatures and everything up evenly and don't overcook the tires in those first two laps, because it really can be detrimental to the car over the stint, and that's exactly what he was doing. So he wasn't panicking, and understandably so. I thought we could DRS by him again, but I think Oscar Piastri obviously had other ideas. So that's why Charles is obviously very disappointed. I mean, for a second place, because when you have those moments when you have a race win right in your pocket, and just one splits decision, makes the difference and takes it away from you. It's something that probably just really irks him quite a lot, I would say.
Yeah, and he said that it was really down to his outlap. He said that his tires, they just took a long time to come in, but the McLarens, he said, for whatever reason, it did not take that amount of time for their tires to come in. Yeah, and he said that was really one of them, and there was some consideration that once his tires had fallen off the cliff, that he may have been backing up Perez into Sainz at that point, trying to get Carlos to hobble Sergio's efforts, prevent him from getting around Charles. And then, we know what happened. But but it may have been his only card to play at that point.
Yeah. I mean, firing the tires up is definitely a choice sometimes by the engineering side as much as by the driver, right? Tire pressures, cambers, everything like that. You can set your car up to light the tires up on lap 1, but usually it's detrimental on lap 10, 15, whatever. And so sometimes you go a little more conservative just for the big picture. And that's obviously what McLaren, maybe track position was more important at that point in the end. I mean, if Piastri is holding back, gaining energy and just making that long straight, unachievable for Charles, he's just going to try this and try that and just eat away at his tires anyway. So.
Yeah, which is what happened. Yeah. Speaking of Carlos had a bit of a quiet race really until the penultimate lap.
Yeah.
And, he had the tire grip to spare. Unlike Charles, I think Charles' rears were gone. Carlos was really coming on pretty strong in the waning laps of the race. Charged forward towards Perez. Once he got to Perez, he made, he went for the pass, went down. It was on the outside as they came out of turn 2. They were side by side coming out of T2. And then they collided with each other. Carlos said that he left plenty of room for Sergio, and he said basically he was very slowly drifting back towards the racing line, which is the center of the track, and he left plenty of room for Sergio, and he didn't understand why they collided or why they hit. Sergio said that he thought that Carlos was going to try to slip in behind him and get the slipstream on him, and that he was I'm just saying, all right, I'm not justifying, I'm just saying. He thought Carlos was maybe caught out about how quickly he came over and came into it. So, but anyway, how did you see it? Because the steward said it's a racing incident and no penalties. How did you see it?
I would call it a racing incident, but I still think Sergio has a bit more percentage in this play. I mean, as you rightly said, the natural line for someone coming off that corner is then to make their way back to the middle where the track is cleaner.
Yep.
You're setting yourself up for the next corner. Obviously, when you're fighting tooth and nail with somebody, you're not, waving them by and waving them through. You don't want to make it easy, and you want to try and move people over. It happens every racetrack in the world, in any race where you do that. You come off the corner of someone side by side, you try and move them over a little bit. And Sergio, for whatever reason, didn't move one iota on the steering wheel. If he had just, as you saw, and it wasn't an abrupt move by Sainz either. It wasn't like he suddenly, he just eased his way over, and for some reason, Sergio didn't react to it at all.
Right.
Normally if someone's coming over, you give up till you can't give up anymore. I mean, everyone's driving with elbows out with 3 laps to go, right? Yep. I mean, that's just going to happen. But you also have to give a little bit so you just don't end up in a crash every time you put your elbows out. And I think Sergio just kind of tried to play the hard man, and it wasn't the time to do it.
You can't go in there with a win it or bin it attitude at this point.
And I don't know if he did that. He, as said, it's not that egregious, but he did have an option. He had a whole another lane to the left as Sergio was moving over naturally to the better line for the track. So, Carlos. So, as I said, I don't think he deserved a penalty for it, but I also think he could have avoided it with just a little bit more heads-up thing. It all to do with Sergio's year, right? He's trying to make things happen, and he had the car. He's out there to try and win the race. He felt like he had a car that was capable of winning the race, and he was just trying. Carlos was just the next step in the rung to get up. But he's. I still think it's a mental thing with him, not being able to see enough of how things are going to play out.
It's a shame because you consider this was his best race in 18 months?
Yeah, it really was. It was great. He out-qualified Max. He raced hard. He was definitely going to be on the podium, and it all went away in just a split second of trying to be a little too hard there, I think, in that place at that time.
Agreed. But we'll talk about Sergio more in a minute. Let's talk about Mercedes, shall we? Why not? I feel like Mercedes should be talked about.
Get down.
You had Lewis Hamilton down P9, George Russell in P3. George had a bad start and set in for a lonely race. Drove a very good stint on his hards, though. Once he got onto the hard compounds, he said that really kind of transformed his car. He was setting competitive pace with the leaders, got up in amongst it, was there. He said that the mediums were a second off the pace, but once he got on the hards, he was really quite a transformed car. George was able to use that grip to get past Max, and then he was set for a P5 until he inherited a podium when Sergio and Carlos collided. But, Paul, this isn't the first time he's done that. George seems to be able to put himself in those positions that, if something comes up, something happens, he's there.
Yeah.
And it's not how you want to get on the podium, but it's happened before. And I kind of feel like it's kind of a lesson. Keep yourself in the hunt. I think You've got to be there. And I don't think there was any moment, whether he was a second off the pace or not, I don't think there was any moment in that race that George wasn't hunting for a podium to keep himself in contention. And you never know when attrition will happen or where it will happen, and it did, and it benefited him. So I think it's a legit P3. Yeah,
you got to maximize the cars you've been given in each day, and some drivers do turn off.
Yeah,
right. If the car isn't great, if they got a bad start, they're in a bad position, etc. Their intensity level goes down. Their maybe maximum lap time overall goes down.
Right.
And that's exactly what you shouldn't do because you just don't know what's going to happen in front of you.
Schumacher should have taught us that.
Yeah, you just got to always be ready. Yeah, you got to have that intensity. And it sets you up for the times when you're leading a race to keep that intensity as well. Right. It's a mental game when you're driving around on your own, that you're still maximizing the car. You're not switching off and just kind of coasting. You just can't afford to do that. And opportunities don't arise if you don't. Always talk to our drivers about that. Just keep pushing. You don't know what's going to happen. They're messing around up front. Things are happening. Just stay in the hunt. If something happens, people come off and they lose a couple of seconds, all of a sudden you're there. But if you thought all was lost and you just kind of backed off and were cruising to the finish line, that opportunity may never have opened itself up to you.
Right. Yeah, and so you look at like Lewis, how motivated is a multi-champion like Lewis to start from pit lane and turn it around? Well, not much, but he was going at it pretty damn hard watching his car.
Yeah.
And he's pretty intense in that car, and he was not happy with the car and not happy with the weekend for sure. And he said they made a car change on Saturday and they were kind of stuck with it for the balance of the weekend. But irrespective, he ends up finishing the points. So he went from pit lane to P9 in the points, which is good to get a couple points. But anyway, it's tough to have that intensity and keep that going for that length of time. But it's a really good point you make. If you can stay back running in P5, 6, 7 and go at it like you're killing snakes and with that intensity and passion for 7th place, then when you are leading a race, it'll come natural to you,
right,
more
exactly.
natural anyway.
Yeah, and it's
Fernando does that.
It is, and that's why it's harder. It's more amazing that Fernando and Lewis keep going. With that, because the years you get worn out, and it's hard to be 100% intense. I'm all the time. It's fatiguing. It's draining.
Right.
And the turnovers, the more races you're in, the shorter the winter is, it's even harder to do that recovery and get yourself, okay, let's go again. I find myself in the same place sometimes when, I'm going from this track to that track to this track to that track. I think I'm doing as many races as the F1 circus is doing at this point. And but you just got to wake up in the morning and just bring it. You walk through that paddock and you go, hell yeah, let's go.
Yeah, for sure. Let's talk about Red Bull. Sergio Perez.
You like my bass? You like it?
I did.
Don't like your choices, but yeah, your pace fine.
I did, Sergio. And he's DNF, Max Verstappen, P5. As we mentioned, Sergio had a good start, jumped Carlos Sainz, and was running in P3 for most of the day, biding his time, managing his tires, which he's generally pretty good at. He had pace for a podium, for sure, possibly a win. Was going to pounce on Charles until he and Carlos came together at turn 2. We've talked at length about that, so we won't readdress that here. Anyone you want to add on Sergio before we move to Max?
Yeah, no, I mean, the big thing, I think actually Carlos and Sergio could have actually run to the front.
Yeah,
their cars were in better place, you know. Maybe it was a bit late, but those two actually were actually flying at the end versus
they were.
Charles and Oscar, who nearly worn each other out, right? So,
right.
I don't know what to say about Sergio. You know, I mean, he did great. He drove very well this whole weekend. Yep. Can he take that and create something more positive going into the next race? I know the incident was a massive negative, and I don't know how the team treat him after that. I know they, you know, on the books they say, oh well, we blames Carlos, you know, but in the end, you know, you're always going to have that little bit of, well, Sergio, did you really need to play, you know, hard man right there? We were in such a good position. We wouldn't have lost the manufacturer's lead if that happened. So
I know. Yeah, it's brutal.
Yeah.
Let's see. Max was off all weekend, and although he jumped Russell at the start, he lost that position and a position to his nearest rival in the shape of Lando Norris. Max struggled with no bite on the front end, brake issues, grip issues. It's shocking to me to see how far these developments have moved that car away from Max. Mm-hmm. And I'm as perplexed as the team, apparently. The team's collective head must be sore from scratching it so much. I have no idea what's going on over there. If Max can't get in the car on the weekend and beat Sergio, there's something way off. Yeah. Way off, you know? And I would argue it's not Max's motivation. He's never not motivated to win.
Yeah.
I don't know what's going on. And you got to ask yourself at this point, Paul, are these the moments, giving all the intra-team drama, all the poaching that's happened? Because they've lost a lot of wind tunnel time. Mm-hmm. You know, they had all... You know, I guess, is this the time that kind of forces big changes across the entire team? Something has just seriously gone awry there. Yeah,
I think the problem is the constant change at the team.
Yeah.
You know? And the turmoil and the infighting and the outside, you know, fighting in the press versus each other. And it has its, you know, as F1 is intense, obviously.
Yeah.
And the other teams see that and they're like, hell yeah.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, any chink, losing Newey, doing this, you know, all these things are add up. There's no way you can get away with all this going on and not losing some performance, not taking, you know, that eye off the ball. Yeah, the focus. Yeah. And is it the people? I don't know, but it's definitely they need to get rid of the drama and get back to racing. And I think all these things have knock-on effects, and I think that's what's happening right now. I really do.
One of our listeners, Paul, said that maybe they don't want the championship because they lost a lot of wind tunnel time with the penalty on the cost cap overspending, and they'd like to get back to being second or third, where they get all of that time back for the wind tunnel to develop it. It's a novel idea, but I think cash is king in this game. But it's an interesting point.
You take your wins when you get them usually, but I mean it is an interesting idea because obviously with the changes coming up very quickly now, anything you can get to develop for that new car. I'm not sure if any teams want to throw away a championship just to do that, but you never know. Some people they're pretty wacky there, Red Bull. They got some crazy ideas.
Christian Horner, he's wacky.
Yeah, I don't see them throwing away on purpose. You know,
I don't either, but they will benefit.
I think their ego's too big to think.
Yeah.
That they can't keep winning anyway. Yeah.
Right. Well, true. But they will enjoy that increased wind tunnel time. That is for sure, because they had such that penalty that they need the wind tunnel time for 2026. So we'll see. Let's talk about Aston Martin. Lance Stroll. Ooh, boy.
I want it now. DNF down there.
He had a DNF. Fernando Alonso P6. Lance had a puncture early on and then retired with brake issues. This is not a car, Paul. This is not a car I'm driving. I don't know what it is, but it's not a car.
Yeah. Meanwhile, Alonso's a second and a half faster. Yeah.
Meanwhile, Alonso's in P6.
Yeah.
Yeah, very tough weekend for Lance. I won't dwell on it. Let's move to Fernando. Fernando made his tires last 41 laps and covered off an attack by Colapinto to bring home P6. Would have been 8, but P6.
Yeah.
He said it was a lonely race for him, but good. He said basically it came down to really good strategy, well-executed pit stops, made all the difference really for him, ended up in P6. So it was actually a decent race for him, although a lonely one.
No, it's a great one. As I said, sometimes the lonely races are the hardest ones. If you're fighting tooth and nail with someone, it's easy to be on top of your game. But when you're out there lonely, you know,
lose focus.
Yeah, you lose a couple of seconds by turning off a little bit, and Colapinto's ahead of you after the pit stops.
Yeah.
So it's important, and if anyone's going to do it, Alonso can keep doing it. I mean, unfortunately, they've been struggling a little bit, and so I'm surprised at the result. Quite honestly. I think that's a bit of a turnaround, and I think Alonso grabbed it by the Alonsos as usual.
Yeah, he didn't he?
Yeah.
Let's talk about Williams. Did you have on your bingo card both Williams cars in Q3 and both Williams cars in the points?
Negative.
I didn't either.
I
had no idea.
so.
What a weekend for this team. I could not be happier for James and the whole team. You had Alex Albon in P7, Franco Colapinto in P8. Is amazing. A fantastic, both of them in the points this weekend. Franco has scored more points, Paul, in the last 2 races than Logan did in the last 2 years.
Oh, wow.
So if that's a resounding confirmation of a mid-season driver change, I don't know what is.
I know. Right? I was just thinking in my mind, what's Logan thinking right now watching this?
I know. That's got sting, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Franco drove a great race. The Argentinian had a great race, was competitive, taking the fight to cars around him, thought he was heads up. They split their strategies. Paul boxed him super early. Right. So he had to come back out, make his his tires last for 41 laps too. Now that's a lot of pressure to put on a youngster like that.
It sure is. Yeah.
And it was great. And I'm sure, Paul, he's hoping that his performance, he's got to make hay while the sun shines. I'm sure he's trying to say, look, guys, I deserve a seat somewhere next year. You know?
Unfortunately, I don't think there's any seats left.
I don't think there's any left. But but he did a great job. I was really proud of him. Great job.
Yeah. No, it's an amazing. I mean, he did great at Monza too. Simpler track. This is not a track you want to drive when you're a rookie Formula One driver. I wouldn't imagine the walls of. He did collect a wall, I think, in one of the practices, but shook that off and got it going. So I honestly, he wasn't on my radar ever.
No, not mine.
So I didn't really know of him. I keep my eye on Formula 2, but he's not one of the guys I was really focusing on. But it makes you question what Formula 2 does for these drivers.
Yeah.
I think Ollie Behrman's had better drives in Formula 1 than he has in F2 all season.
F2, yeah.
Right? I mean, it always seems to be a bit of a miss between the jump up. If you're good in F2, doesn't necessarily mean it's going to equate to when you're in an F1 car or vice versa.
Or vice versa, yeah.
Yeah, and so obviously James Vowles knows Colapinto pretty well, part of the Young Driver Academy, so knew what he was getting more than any of us did.
Sure.
And it turned out to be pretty stout performance. To be able to, he was beaten Albon at some point.
He was ahead of Albon,
yeah, and just qualifying pace and everything like that seems to be the match of Albon. Probably the worst thing that can happen to Alex right now, actually, is to have a young guy come in and kind of start matching. He's like, oh, maybe he wasn't that special, but
Argentina knows how to make world champions down there.
Yes, they do. Yeah, they had a habit. Yeah, it's in the blood.
It's in the blood down there. Well done, Argentina. I think it was a fantastic performance. Alex had a good race too. Ran as high as third, but once he made his pit stop, he was able to drive back into the points. Finished with his teammate on his tail, which is a terrific result for the team. And they're, don't forget, folks, they're trying to take that fight to Haas for P7 in the constructors. And for a small team like Williams, that's, a bunch of money. That could be $10, $20 million in prize money. So it's a big deal for James and the entire team, and real happy for them. I think that Williams trimmed out for this track was good. Strategy was good. Splitting the strategy worked out well. I think the team kind of hit on all cylinders. So, but it was a good race for Alex too.
Absolutely. They maximized the weekend. They've had some ups and downs this year, obviously. Yeah. I think it's really Colapinto coming in and doing what he's done is probably going to really help raise the game of the whole organization, because they've been beat down quite a bit. The car's crashing, they're not scoring points, blah blah blah. They've got no chassis, all that kind of good stuff. It's all positive. So for Williams, let's hope they can build on it and make the lows less low, and give this kid a chance. Unfortunately, I just don't think there's anywhere for him to go. Yeah, unless Audi want to bring him in, but then I don't think James Vowles wants to cart him off to another manufacturer either. Yeah, it's tough. This is it's one weekend. I don't want to make a prediction on a one-off, but this is, there's that D mark line, Paul, where you've got the Red Bulls, McLarens, Mercedes, Ferraris, and all that. Yeah. Then there's this D mark line at midfield, and that D mark line, if you look last year, Alpine was kind of playing just above that D mark line early this year. Aston Martin was, running above that D mark line, certainly in the points, always nipping in the points, always thereabouts. Could be 5th to 10th, anywhere. Williams always at the back. Sauber at the back, Alpine now at the back, Haas kind of nipping into that 9th, 10th, kind of bumping into the points all season. But it's that sort of consistency. This is what you want for Williams every weekend. You want him going into the weekend, having a decent competitive weekend in the midfield, nipping into the points, thereabouts, 9th, 10th, getting into Q2, Q3, having that consistency as they start to grow and develop that car. This is kind of where you want to see them slotted in. Yeah. Whereas with Alpine, the converse has happened. They were kind of in that position and then they drifted out. Aston Martin kind of in that position and they're struggling to hang in there. If it wasn't for Alonso, they wouldn't be, right? It'd be Haas. So, this is, I hope they continue this. I hope this is sign to come. Yep. Speaking of Haas, Nico Hülkenberg, P11, Ollie Behrman, P10. Ollie had a great race, even gave the position to Hulk early on, but then Nico, went around him and went off to his own race. But Ollie was feisty all day, fighting, said that he lacked pace on his first stint, but then he did much better on his second stint. But when he was pushing his tires, they overheated pretty quickly, and that allowed Franco to get around him. But he scored a point nonetheless. A great result, inherited, of course, but he still scored a point, and that was good for him in a great race. I think just not putting it at the barrier, ripping front wings off, those kind of things. Yeah, thinks it was good. A lot of this. Io was the guest team boss for Sky this weekend, and they were asking, Ollie's looking really good. Might you reconsider your decision on Kevin and just bring Ollie in mid-season and give him some experience in the balance of the season? He's like, oh, what are you, a lawyer? What are you? It's like, I'm sure Kevin's contract has some teeth in that to prevent that. I would think.
But anyway, I thought it was a good stand-in for Ollie, great practice, and I think he did a great job.
Yeah, he did a great job and gives the team, really buoys the team looking for next year. For next year. We saw, what he did in the Ferrari, but, being able to stay on toe-to-toe with Hülkenberg is no mean feat and scoring point. And, that's more than they could have asked for, quite honestly. Right. Probably going in, they were probably like, just give him experience and he'll be more ready for next year. But, hey, he comes back with some loot in his pocket. Brilliant.
Yeah, that's great. Nico looked competitive at the start. He passed Franco and looked set for points, but then he ran over some debris that was still on the track, damaged his front wing. That left him drifting backwards and on the outside looking in. So not a great race for Nico.
No, but the team should be more than happy. They've been much more consistent, as you said. Just knocking on the door of points, and when opportunities arise, they get them. So
they're there. Yeah, that's exactly what you want. If you're a team trying to move forward. Now, if you're a team trying to move backwards, this is
this is the pattern you want to follow.
Yeah. This track was for Alpine. This track was not friendly.
Not friendly. Not friendly.
So what you've got is Alpine, Pierre Gasly in P12, Esteban Ocon P15. Not a lot to talk about the team. Really, like Lewis, Esteban started from pit lane. Pierre started at the back of the grid after his disqualification over a fuel flow violation in qualifying. Not good. From there, they made very little progress, but Pierre ran the whole race practically on hards and then put soft on the last lap to finish P12. So that was a bold strategy. And that's how that played out for him. But tough weekend for Alpine. Yeah,
very tough, very tough. You know, it's unfortunate when those little blips in the data, they go over and it was like just some part that's failing or whatever. Nothing, they're not cheating, they're not doing this and that, but the rules are the rules. Don't I know it? Then you have to stick to them, and anything that goes awry, you have to pay the penalty. But and
got to turn your car off during a pit stop.
Yeah, what the hell? Stupid rules.
Stupid rule.
But the Alpine are just, I don't know what to say about them.
And I did ask. Folks, I did ask Paul if Mohammed bin Salem has been at the WEC races to personally weigh in Ian as he got out of the car. He has not done that yet.
Not yet.
So, good news is Ian hasn't been ushered around by Eddie Everywhere and personally weighed in.
Probably not enough TV at WEC.
Not enough
to warrant him making an appearance.
Not enough screen time. Let's see. RB, Daniel Ricciardo, P13, Yuki Tsunoda, DNF. Same result as the last race, 13 and a DNF for RB. It's just going, is Red Bull. If you think they're having a tough time, RB is really strong.
Right. And I think it's probably all part of the same problem, right? But they were down here, so they dropped in the same amount.
Yeah.
They're way out of the points at this point. Ricciardo, even if he was trying to trying to replace Sergio, he can't show anything right now with the car they have.
No, he did the same thing Gasly did, ran forever on his first stint. Then he was hoping for a safety car, which never showed up. Then changed at the last and ended up P13. Yuki had that coming together with Lance Stroll, ripped off his section of his side pod. Then he retired the car, so not good. Not good at all.
Oh, no, it all went wrong.
Let's see. Kick Sauber in the nuts. Kick Sauber in the shin. I'll say that.
Yeah.
So Sauber, brutal. Valtteri Bottas in P16, Joe Guan Yu in P14. Bested the veteran Valtteri, he did. The team split their strategies, had Valtteri on mediums, Joe on hards for the start. Despite that, and 4 cars out of the race ahead of them, they still didn't score points. It's killing me, Smalls.
I was riding along with Bottas in the video because he was kind of right behind that incident using that.
Was he doing what Vettel said Alonso was doing? Was he doing a bus tour of Baku?
Pretty much. He was, but that car looked horrible.
Did it?
I mean, there's not much occasion I would need to jump in the Sauber and see what's going on, but geez, that car had nothing going for it.
Yeah, well, it'd leave Lando to say,
"Oh, Jesus."
Yeah,
it's not good.
Yeah, I don't think Bottas was pushing his nth degree.
You don't think he was 10/10, huh?
I don't think so.
Yeah, probably not.
Yeah.
At this point, I do wonder if they're going to score a single point the entire season. That's brutal. That's just brutal. Yeah. It really is. I hate it for all the team members, all the men and women who work for that team. I'm sure they're working their tails off. It's just, oh my gosh. Yeah. So we'll see.
Binotto will fix everything, don't worry.
Yep. You ask for a miracle, I give you Mattia Binotto. So let's give out some awards, shall we? First award is Move of the Race. Woo!
Seriously, Todd?
Yes, seriously. I suspect your move and my move are the same. Was it Oscar on Charles?
Absolutely. Got to do it.
It's a given.
It's so important. Even though
That's
it
a
was
given.
a DRS pass, technically,
It was
a pretty dynamic late braking move that most people can't pull off. So
yes, it was.
Yeah.
All right. And next award is Donkey of the Race.
We'll do it live.
Oh yes, Donkey of the Race, Paul. Did you have Perez and Carlos?
yes, sir.
I did too. Yeah.
I don't want to keep. I mean, I think we could rename this the Stake F1 Donkey of the Race Award because I'd usually give it to them for being so horrendous. But you got to give it to this. How much they lost in just a split second of decision making
from podium to DNF. That's brutal. And final word is Drive of the Race.
Get down.
Get in there, Lewis.
All right. Did you have Oscar?
I did, but obviously got to give you honorable mentions to the young guns. Not that Oscar's old, but he's not old at all.
And,
for the
Behrman.
The new guys did an incredible job both scoring
They really
the points.
did.
So yeah,
they really did. Great. Let's do some mailbag.
You've got mail.
Okay.
Mr. Mufti asked this. He says, hello, and thanks for the podcast. Long-time listener from Saudi. Well, hey there. Found myself listening to your podcast way more than actually watching the races.
Wow.
Okay. Good for you. I'm glad we're at least getting in.
I guess maybe the older chatter at the beginning isn't as bad for some people. Yeah.
And he said, thanks for all the insights. Well, thank you so much for the kind words and for listening. He said, your podcast about Audi driver selection got me to thinking about the Young Drivers Academy. Are drivers, and this is really for you, Paul, I'm not a professional driver, you are drivers actually extensively taught how to adapt their driving style to the car characteristics? We often discuss which is more important, the car versus the driver. But if Max likes a pointy car, is he going to do well in another team unless he's taught to really change his driving style and can actually do it? Then maybe not. Rather than rookie versus experience, I think Audi should choose drivers with identical car preferences. That way their car development benefits both drivers. What do you think, Paul?
That's a tough question. Ultimately, you always just want the best driver you can see, but it's not. It goes beyond the fastest lap they can do. It's how they can run a weekend, how they can use racecraft, how they can work with the team engineering wise. Obviously, with sports cars, difference is quite stark between a Porsche and a Aston front engine versus mid engine versus rear engine Acuras. Some drivers have a problem going over to the other vehicles. There's no way you can drive an Aston Martin the same way you can drive an NSX. It's just not possible. And if you're a person that likes that feel of that car, you really have to do the adaptation, else you're just going to be off the pace.
Yeah.
And obviously, then that is true in itself for Formula One as well. The cars do handle different. The engine performance is different. All the cars designed differently, even though miraculously now all the lap times are so close together. It's making for a thrilling season. But it's hard to define what a driver is absolutely going to be suited for. With someone like Max, yes, you're not going to invite him to the team and tell Max but this car doesn't point very well, but it makes it up in this and this and this, so you need to adapt. You're not going to do that. You need to enhance the best that driver can be and try and make work the car as well as it can be towards what is their best assets. Right. So, till you get
but
someone
I also
in the
think
team,
of Paul like a guy like Alonso. You remember how he used to just jam him in, but then he radically changed his driving approach. Whereas I think Daniel Ricciardo has struggled more so with this era of cars and adapting his driver's style versus what Alonso's been able to do and adapt his style. So is that sort of driver dependent, that ability and to have that adaptability? It's driver specific. Some drivers just have it, some don't.
Yeah, some drivers have that adaptability. They can read it. I mean, Alonso's, big brain on Brad, I mean, he can see what the car needs before anyone can tell him what it needs and then starts adapting to it. And some drivers can't do that. And it's, as I said, it's hard to know till you get into the team. Looking from the outside in, there's no way of knowing how these drivers work within a team and how they're engineered. Sometimes I've seen drivers come and they're like, you don't know anything.
Yeah.
You know,
Right.
yeah, you can drive a car fast, but you're not an asset in the engineering department in the debriefs, right? Give him a gun and he'll shoot the bullseye. But other than that, you know, he doesn't know how to load it. You know,
Yeah,
so
right.
so it's you're not gonna be hiring the level of driver you need. There's not enough of them to then pick. Oh, well, you're a person that likes this kind of car, so we'll have you.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so there's a lot of back and forths on this question. It's a great question, a really great question.
Yeah,
but ultimately, every team will try and get the best possible driver they can, and then try and make that car work to make their assets as honed and exploit them as best they can as well.
And in that case, you think of Red Bull as a good example of two drivers of pretty different driving styles.
Yeah.
How the car favors Max, and it's very pointy, and Sergio may not like that.
Right.
And Sergio has struggled to get on top of that or to find the adaptability. I think that's difficult for some drivers. And so then you've got that disparity between them.
Yeah, because the best driver on the team is going to lead the engineering.
Yeah.
And I think I heard something like Sergio was not going to be focusing on what Max does as much, and maybe focus on himself, which is probably the best thing he can do, really.
Yeah, agreed. Great question. Next up is Matt. Matt asks us, "Hey, Paul and Todd, thanks for the podcast. Been listening since September 2010. Wow, Matt, that's awesome."
Thank you.
He said, "I think
that's a long time."
It is a long time, very long time. That's too long to listen to me, honestly. Let's see. Note reminder. This question is before the Baku Grand Prix.
Okay.
Do you think Lando is turning into a Coulthard and Oscar Amica? I just worry that he may not have the ultra ruthless streak. He's a wet nurse, laugh out loud. Anyway, can't wait for the review, Matt.
Yeah.
What do you think? Do you think Lando's turning into a Coulthard?
No, I don't see it. I don't think he's cut of that cloth. It may mean he can't drive with Oscar. Maybe there has to be a decision made at some point. Yeah, a move to put himself in a better position if he thinks Oscar's, somehow taken over the team somehow. But I can't imagine Lando ever going down to that level. I think he's too good. I know we say Piastri is my choice if I had to choose between the two, but that doesn't mean Norris can't win a world championship in the right place, right time, in maybe a different team.
Right. But it's a bit like Highlander. There can only be one. I know his name. Yes, I agree. It'll be interesting to see how that all plays out, but I think there's enough dragon inside Lando. We saw him when he came in, and he's the impish sort of, jokester and all that, and he's a markedly different Lando now.
Yeah.
And I think in a couple of years' time, he'll be even a markedly different.
And it's easy us we were making decisions on what happened the last race. Look at Lando's had some pretty damn impressive drives.
Very impressive.
So you got to look at the big picture, but he's the real thing. He's the real thing for sure.
He is the real thing for sure. So anyway, great question. All right. Well, that does it for this podcast. That's what we think about this race. Now, Paul and I are going to be in Indianapolis this weekend, and we're going to try to squeeze in the Singapore Grand Prix and have a review.
Yeah.
So this should be fun. And while I'm there, I'll try to post pictures and fun content on our social channels. So be sure to watch that this weekend from the IMSA race at Indianapolis. If you're going to be in Indianapolis for the IMSA race, be sure to come by and say hi to Paul, because I'll be following him around like a puppy dog. Paul, I need to go to the bathroom, Paul.
Get off.
And,
go see Roger. Roger needs you. Go, Roger. Go to Roger.
Go, Roger. Roger wants to talk to you. Yes, he wants to wish you a happy birthday. Yes. Yeah. So anyway, we'll be doing that. But if you like this podcast, be sure to give us a good rating on your favorite players. Spread it with your friends. Share it. Promote it. We'd be incredibly grateful for your help in that. A huge thank you to all of our Patreon supporters for all of the support you give us. would not do this podcast without you. You can go to our website and become a Patreon supporter. Go to theparkferme.com, and on the right-hand side, and I think even down at the bottom, you can click on that and you can become a supporter. And if you do that, you can join us in our live audiences when we record on Monday nights here in the U.S. So a huge thank you to all of you for your support. And Paul, I guess in a few days, I'll see you in Indy.
That's right.
It's going to be exciting.
Hopefully the media room has better nachos than Daytona for you.
Paul and I got hooked up at Daytona 24. We're in the media center eating hot dogs that have been there since last January.
Since Richard Petty lost one of his NASCAR races.
In a Plymouth. And then the nachos have been sitting under a heat lamp for about 3 years. It was brutal, man.
Yeah.
But we were starving. It's like, it's like, oh my gosh, it was terrible.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I hope Indy is a little better. But anyway, all right. Well, be sure to watch our social channel over the weekend. Hopefully, Paul's he'll be working, but I'll be trying to take pictures in real time, action shots of Paul, running and working. I'll be trying to get that. But anyway, should be fun. All right. Until next week when we do it all over again, this is Todd, aka Negative Camera, saying so long.
That's it, man. Game over, man. Game over. It's not what I feel I've got to prove at all. I don't really want to prove anything. I started as an amateur with no idea or no intention of becoming world champion. I was curious to find out what it was like to drive a car fast, to drive on a certain circuit, to drive a certain type of car.